Ciera, and the claim that I'm responding to is that Planned Parenthood is a necessary asset to the communities. My opponent's claims to support her argument are the following. 1, Planned Parenthood provides services for the reproductive health care for both men and women. 2, Planned Parenthood provides services for the reproductive health care at low cost that would be otherwise unaffordable for people of low income and ages under 20. And 3, offers women and girls the chance to control their choices for their reproductive system. In response to my opponent's first claim, there's no denying whether or not Planned Parenthood provides services for both men and women. This is a claim of fact. However, my opponent created a false view by making it seem as though Planned Parenthood is the only option for individuals to go to. In this claim, my opponent also stated that Planned Parenthood provides abortion services for unplanned pregnancies, which again is a claim of fact. My opponent stated that the main focus on Planned Parenthood is abortion services, which she's absolutely correct. She said, and I quote, "A legal representative stated that almost 90% of Planned Parenthood services are abortion, when in fact only 3% of their services is abortion." As you can see, this statement that my opponent tried to make, it seems as though 3% is not a big deal, when actually 3% is a really high rate of abortion. If we take a look at Planned Parenthood as a whole, there's an annual report for 2011-2012. It showed that its affiliate clinics performed 333,964 abortions in the fiscal year of 2011-2012. That is, on average, 1 abortion for every 94 seconds. The real argument against Planned Parenthood should be the amount of tax dollars going into the organization to fund these services and why we should cut the government funding, which leads me to my next response. My opponents claim that Planned Parenthood provides health services at low cost would be for people who are of low income and ages under 20. The reason why Planned Parenthood can provide services at such a low rate is because it's funded by the government. The evidence that was presented by CNN News states, and I quote, "The 2011-2012 Planned Parenthood received $542.4 million in government health services and grant reimbursements. That's over $500 million in government funding, which makes up of 45% of Planned Parenthood's income." Also stated in their annual report, Planned Parenthood had an excess revenue of $87.4 million in the year ending in 2012. They received so much funding from the government that they nearly had an excess of $100 million left over from last year. In addition, low-income individuals are restricted to receiving these services. They're not restricted to just receiving the services from Planned Parenthood. Medicaid is a federal program that is funded by tax-paying dollars and managed by the states for low-income families. Medicaid covers the same services that Planned Parenthood offers, but has more restriction on abortion. With Medicaid, abortion is only acceptable for rape, incest, and life endangerment. This is because of the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment was passed in Congress by Congress in 1976 to ensure that abortion was not funded by any healthcare services provided by the federal government. That leads me to my next response. My opponent states that Planned Parenthood offers women and girls the option to control their choices on their reproductive system. The freedom for these women to make choices on their reproductive system does not derive from Planned Parenthood. Women have the right and the freedom to make choices about their bodies regardless. They can receive the same help and information from any other health clinic. When it comes to abortion, Planned Parenthood is not the only place, which according to abortionfree.us, there are currently 660 abortion clinics in the United States. It is true that every year less and less clinics perform abortions, but this gives females the freedom to still choose what they would like to do for unplanned pregnancies. Planned Parenthood is highly funded by the government and uses taxpayer dollars to perform these services. It has the highest rate of abortions annually out of all of abortion clinics. This is why I stated earlier, 3% of their services represents a really high rate of abortion. Not all Americans also believe in abortion, so not all Americans would like for their tax funding dollars to go towards these services. In conclusion, my opponent's main claim was that Planned Parenthood is a necessary asset to communities. However, with the evidence I just provided showing that there are other options available today to provide the same services as Planned Parenthood, I believe I sufficiently proved that Planned Parenthood is not necessary to the communities.
All right, I like that you set up the main and secondary claims at the beginning. As you got to the first point, I think there was a little bit of confusion here because you basically said this is a claim of fact. What you, I think, really meant was this is a fact, that it's not in dispute, and so there's no inference to be made on it. And you want to be sure that you're careful in the language there, because that's really the crux of your argument here. You're not going to challenge whether or not that there are services that are being provided. You then mentioned the number of abortions that are funded through Planned Parenthood affiliates. That's pretty straightforward information. The question that I think we're missing here also, though, is what other kinds of services are they providing and how extensive are those services? And we don't really get any sense of how many people are covered by these issues, or what kinds of visits they get, or what any of those health services happen to be. So I think that that stays a little bit ambiguous. On the second point, you make the argument about that these are available in other places, and they've got these access to these kinds of services. You mentioned how much we spend giving to Planned Parenthood, but what I didn't hear was any information about any other services that are providing this. You say Medicare can pay for those services. Okay, well, do they? Do they have these kinds of affiliates? What kinds of people go there? Do they provide the same services? That's why it's kind of important on that first point to know what the services are that are being provided, so that we know that Medicaid provides those same kinds of services. I think that that's a place where there's just a little bit of underdevelopment there. The argument about that there are additional restrictions on abortions, I think, gives a pretty clear explanation about why this group would be seen as being more acceptable, or would have less of the value issues that are so laden with Planned Parenthood there. And as long as they're providing the other services, that seems like that's the argument that you want to focus on. And then on the last point, I do think that you have a pretty reasonable argument here that says, look, Planned Parenthood isn't the one who grants people the right to control their services, to control their decision-making on those kinds of things. The only way that that might be the case is if Planned Parenthood was the only provider of abortion services, and without the money they couldn't provide abortion services. Then maybe the advocate would be right on that. But then I think that would also make the opponents of Planned Parenthood right, saying that this is, basically providing abortion here, and then you have a completely different argument. You mentioned what the value issue is there that people object to. All right, thank you.